Believe it or not, one of the biggest royal talking points started with a simple scone argument. At the center of it all was a Heart FM radio segment. Cream first or jam first? The debate Britain has been obsessing over for decades and apparently has no plans to settle anytime soon. William revealed that Queen Elizabeth always put the cream on first. The hosts rolled out trays of scones and became surprisingly passionate about defending their positions. William laughed the entire time with the confidence of someone completely unbothered by how he might be perceived. And naturally, the clip exploded across social media because it was exactly the sort of content people cannot resist sharing. A future king, relaxed, entertaining, discussing something that had absolutely nothing to do with royal duties, constitutional responsibilities, or the monarchy itself. Then, not long afterward, Meghan Markle's as ever brand released polished footage featuring warm scones, jam, cream, and a perfectly curated British tea setting. And the internet, being the internet, noticed almost instantly.
Meghan Markle's creepy Prince William stalking has just been uncovered, and what it shows you is that she is still completely obsessed with the other.
Tonight, we are diving into the scone saga, what it reveals about the growing contrast between these two public figures in 2025, the William and Aston Villa phone call moment that somehow became its own viral sensation during the very same week, and the much bigger question this entire scone comparison raises about where the Sussex brand really stands 5 years after the departure that was supposed to symbolize complete independence. Because this story is not actually about scones. It is about whether a brand built around breaking away from the royal world has truly achieved independence or whether it remains, in the ways that matter most commercially, tied to the very story it claimed to leave behind. Let's begin with the Heart FM clip because the context is far more interesting than the headline makes it seem. William appeared for a light-hearted segment centered on one of Britain's most endlessly divisive questions. Does the cream go on before the jam, or does the jam go on before the cream? For anyone outside Britain, a little explanation is necessary. The Cornish camp insists on jam first, followed by cream. The Devonians are equally convinced that cream must come first, followed by jam. Both sides defend their position with the kind of certainty that suggests they have never seriously considered the opposing argument. This debate has survived generations, fueled conversations at parish fêtes, tea rooms, and comment sections, and continues with remarkable sincerity to this day. It is also completely harmless, which is exactly why it works so well as a public moment for a royal trying to appear relatable. William revealed that Queen Elizabeth always preferred cream first. He said it with affection and with the confidence of someone citing an authority few people would dare challenge. The late Queen's preference is not exactly an easy argument to beat. The hosts tried anyway. Soon trays of scones appeared. The discussion turned delightfully chaotic as people talked over one another and waved pastries around, which is honestly the perfect energy for this particular debate. William laughed throughout in a way that felt entirely genuine rather than carefully managed. He was clearly enjoying himself. That authenticity was impossible to miss, and it is exactly why the clip landed so effectively. He came across as approachable, quick-witted, and completely comfortable. That particular kind of public presence tends to generate the strongest reactions. The clip was warm, widely shared, and embraced even by audiences that normally pay little attention to royal news. It spread because it was funny and because William looked like a real person rather than a public figure trying to act like one. The clip gained momentum fast. Major British outlets covered it. Royal fan pages reposted it. Comment sections filled with people passionately reopening the cream versus jam debate while citing family traditions, regional loyalties, and grandmother-approved recipes. By virtually every social engagement measure, it was a remarkably successful public moment, and it worked precisely because it was never trying to be one. It was simply meant to be fun, and that difference was obvious in the way audiences responded. Then Meghan Markle's as ever account entered the conversation with its own scone content. Warm lighting, elegant table settings, cream, jam, and a carefully curated British tea aesthetic. Everything looked polished, intentional, and visually refined. The timing immediately sparked discussion. William's scone conversation had already been generating positive headlines and strong engagement for several days. Then the as ever post arrived right in the middle of that momentum, featuring the same central item, the same food tradition, and the same cultural atmosphere, only transformed from a spontaneous radio discussion into polished lifestyle brand imagery.
The thing is, Angela, there's nothing British about this woman. There's nothing royal about this woman. When she was actually here, she hated.
If Palace Insider is connecting dots that other channels keep missing, hit that like button because it genuinely helps more people find these discussions. It takes a second, costs absolutely nothing, and makes a bigger difference than you might think. Now, let's get specific about what critics were actually saying because the online reaction quickly split into several different conversations, and each one deserves to be examined separately. The most common argument centered on timing. Critics pointed out that Meghan Markle's content appeared while William's scone segment was still generating strong social media engagement and widespread coverage. According to them, the overlap was simply too specific to be brushed aside as pure coincidence. Scones are not exactly a routine background element in lifestyle content. They are a distinctly British cultural symbol, and at that particular moment they had already become closely associated with a highly positive and widely shared public appearance by the future king. The As Ever post entered an active conversation that was already happening. It did not arrive in a vacuum. A second argument focused on aesthetics. Critics noted that the visual style of the As Ever scone footage leaned heavily into classic British tea culture. Everything from the carefully arranged presentation to the elegant lighting reflected a refined visual language commonly associated with traditional British prestige. By extension, that same visual world is often linked to aristocratic culture and the royal institution itself. According to critics, this choice created an interesting contradiction with the story that had been told since the 2020 departure. The public narrative surrounding that departure was built around moving away from the royal establishment and creating something entirely separate. Yet to some observers, the imagery in the As Ever content appeared to draw from many of the same cultural associations that story was supposed to leave behind.
Charming interview with Prince William where he revealed, finally, that the late Queen Elizabeth II had decided the conundrum when it comes to the great British tradition of how to have your scone.
The original public story surrounding the royal exit was crystal clear. It was supposed to be about creating something fresh, independent, and completely separate from royal life. The goal, at least publicly, was to build a brand that no longer relied on the imagery, symbolism, or visual identity of the institution left behind. But according to critics, the As Ever scone footage appeared to do exactly the opposite. To them, it looked like that same royal-inspired visual language had simply been repackaged and transferred from a palace setting into a commercial one. Then there was a third argument, and this one went far beyond a single social media post. Critics claim a larger pattern has been developing throughout the life of the As Ever brand. Their argument is that the brand's biggest moments rarely come from content standing entirely on its own. Instead, the strongest engagement seems to appear whenever the brand intersects with royal themes, royal imagery, or stories connected to specific members of the royal family. The scone controversy seemed to fit that pattern perfectly. What generated the most discussion was not the product itself, nor the presentation, nor the lifestyle message. The real source of attention was its perceived connection to a viral William moment that had already captured public interest.
William, what do you do? Think carefully.
I love that I'm the authority on scones. I can only tell you what I learned from my grandmother, and she had the cream on first.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she did.
Okay, there you go.
That is the Devonian way.
Cream on first, jam.
If that observation is even partially correct, and several months of As Ever coverage seem to point in that direction, it creates a rather awkward commercial reality. The brand appears to receive its strongest visibility and biggest conversations at the exact moments when it moves closest to the royal world it was supposedly built to move beyond. In other words, independence does not seem to be generating the attention. Royal proximity does. And for a brand originally marketed as a symbol of independence, that is not exactly the easiest reality to explain away. Before we go further, make sure you're subscribed to Palace Insider and let us know your thoughts below. Was this deliberate strategy pure coincidence or something that falls somewhere in between? Because the conversation becomes even more interesting once another voice enters the picture, Angela Levin. Angela Levin, who has spent years covering both the Sussexes and the wider royal family, offered her own interpretation of the As Ever scone content, and she did not exactly hold back. In her view, the return to British-inspired tea culture imagery, refined presentation styles, floral displays, and elegant serving arrangements reflects more than an occasional creative choice. She argues that these elements appear often enough to suggest a continuing connection to the visual world of an institution the brand officially left behind. Levin's broader theory, one she has repeated in multiple interviews and discussions and revisited after the scone controversy, is that Meghan Markle struggled with certain aspects of the royal hierarchy itself. More specifically, she points to the reality that Catherine, Princess of Wales, occupied a permanently senior position within the institution as the wife of the heir to the throne, regardless of media attention, celebrity status, or public profile. Whether Levin's interpretation accurately reflects reality or stretches beyond the available evidence is ultimately something viewers will have to decide for themselves. But her comments undeniably added another layer to a debate that was already generating significant attention.
Dream first, jam second. Within hours, Meghan Markle had decided she was going to use that as a little stunt, for her business was never.
What this really did was place the entire scone controversy inside a much larger debate about the relationship between the Sussex brand and the royal world it officially left behind. The discussion also expanded into product promotion choices made during the same period, particularly references to family members' personal preferences in marketing content. Critics argued that bringing private family details into commercial promotions clashes with the Sussex household's long-standing emphasis on privacy. Supporters pushed back, insisting that mentioning favorite flavors or everyday preferences is hardly a privacy violation and is actually a common way lifestyle brands create a more personal connection with audiences. That disagreement highlights a broader challenge. Maintaining a strict public stance on privacy while operating a lifestyle brand is not always straightforward because lifestyle branding is built on selective personal sharing. The more personal details included in the content, the more questions emerge about where the privacy line actually exists. Now let's shift to Aston Villa because this happened during the same week, and the contrast quickly became a major talking point across royal commentary. Aston Villa secured a victory, and William, a well-known supporter whose loyalty to the club has been documented for years, was there celebrating. Video footage showed him recording the crowd, cheering alongside fellow fans, and fully immersed in the excitement that only football can create. The clips spread rapidly online, partly because the win itself mattered and partly because William's excitement felt completely genuine and impossible to fake. Then viewers noticed something unexpected. During the celebration, William's phone appeared to ring. He glanced at it, declined the call without answering, and immediately returned to enjoying the moment. That brief, 3-second interaction somehow became its own viral story. Almost instantly, comment sections across Twitter and Instagram filled with jokes, theories, and increasingly creative guesses about who could possibly be calling the future king during a football celebration and why the call was apparently not important enough to interrupt it. The speculation was playful, the memes arrived quickly, and the moment took on a life completely separate from the match itself. What made the footage so interesting was not just the entertainment value. It was what the clip communicated about William's current public image. He was not trying to appear relatable. He was simply experiencing a football victory like any passionate supporter would. He was cheering, filming, celebrating, and living entirely inside the moment rather than managing a carefully crafted image of being in the moment. That distinction mattered. The phone dismissal resonated because it felt universally familiar. Almost everyone has ignored a call while caught up in something they did not want to leave. The fact that it happened during a football celebration made the moment feel even more relatable. It was not a royal moment. It was a human one. And when commentators placed the two stories side by side, the contrast became impossible to ignore. On one side, William was at a football match, laughing, celebrating, and casually dismissing a phone call while completely absorbed in the experience. On the other, Meghan Markle's as-ever account presented elegant scone footage, carefully arranged tea settings, cream and jam displays, and highly polished visuals designed for maximum aesthetic impact. Neither approach is inherently wrong. Lifestyle brands are expected to look polished. Football celebrations are expected to be spontaneous. But they communicate very different things about the people behind them. One feels like real life being captured as it happens. The other feels like a version of life being carefully packaged for public consumption. That contrast became the foundation for much of the week's commentary. And what makes this discussion particularly interesting goes far beyond scones. It raises larger questions about the long-term positioning of the Sussex brand and whether the original vision behind it has unfolded as intended. When Harry and Meghan Markle stepped away from royal life in 2020, the move was presented as a break from institutional limitations, royal hierarchy, and the structures that placed Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales, above them in every official context. The promise of the California chapter was independence. The expectation was that a new brand would emerge, one capable of standing entirely on its own without relying on royal connections for relevance or commercial momentum. Yet 5 years later, many of the brand's biggest conversations continue to occur in direct proximity to royal event. The scone content appears alongside William's viral scone discussion. Conversations about royal hierarchy reappear. Visual themes associated with traditional British prestige continue to attract attention whenever they surface. Whether intentional or not, those recurring connections remain at the center of the public conversation. The most heavily discussed as ever stories almost always seem to be the ones carrying some kind of royal connection. That is why Angela Levin's interpretation of the scone controversy deserves attention, even if you completely disagree with where her conclusions lead. Levin has argued for years that Meghan Markle struggled with certain realities of royal hierarchy. In particular, she has pointed to the fact that Catherine, Princess of Wales, as the wife of the heir to the throne, would always occupy a formally senior position within the institution regardless of celebrity status, media coverage, public popularity, or personal influence. In practical terms, Prince William and Catherine were the senior royal couple. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were the junior couple. According to Levin, that was never something open to negotiation. It could not be changed through charitable work, public attention, strategic branding, or media success because the structure was determined by succession and birth order rather than anything the Sussexes could control. Whether that specific dynamic played a role in the royal departure remains a matter of opinion, but Levin's broader point extends beyond psychology and focuses on something much more visible. Her argument is that the brand continues to draw from imagery and cultural references that remain closely associated with the royal world. And regardless of whether viewers agree with her reasoning, the visual connection is easy to understand. The footage presents a very specific version of British prestige culture. Candlelit tea settings, fine china, carefully arranged cream and jam displays, elegant presentation designed to evoke refinement and tradition. These are visual cues tied to a particular social world. And historically, that world is one the royal family has represented more visibly and consistently than almost anyone else. As a result, those associations naturally become part of the conversation whenever similar imagery appears. The privacy debate added yet another layer. During the same period, as ever, promotional content included casual references to household preferences, favorite flavors, and details about what family life supposedly looks like around the table. Critics argued that this creates a contradiction for a household that has repeatedly emphasized privacy, particularly regarding family members and children. To them, incorporating personal family details into commercial promotion raises obvious questions. Supporters disagreed. They argued that mentioning somebody's favorite flavor in a cooking video hardly qualifies as a privacy violation and instead serves as a normal way of making lifestyle content feel more relatable. But that disagreement highlights a challenge that continues to follow the brand. Lifestyle branding depends on selective personal disclosure. It requires revealing enough of everyday life to create interest while deciding which parts remain private. The result is an ongoing debate about where the line actually exists and whether that line remains consistent from one situation to the next. Then there was the Memorial Day timing. Critics noted that the as-ever scone content appeared during an American holiday weekend when many people were focused on barbecues, outdoor gatherings, and summer celebrations rather than traditional British tea settings. Some observers felt there was a disconnect between the holiday atmosphere and the visual presentation of the content. Whether that reflects a strategic misstep or simply an unfortunate coincidence depends largely on how much intention people believe went into the scheduling. What the entire scone week revealed with unusual clarity was something that had already been developing over previous months. The conversation surrounding the brand continues to be shaped more by royal context than by anything happening entirely on its own. William's cream-first revelation generated several days of positive coverage entirely through its own momentum. Meanwhile, Meghan Markle's scone content attracted attention largely because of its perceived relationship to William's already viral moment. That distinction may be the most important takeaway from the entire story. The bigger question is not whether the timing was intentional. It is not whether the imagery was carefully chosen or simply reflected the brand's preferred aesthetic. The real question is whether as-ever has reached the point where it can create its own cultural momentum without needing a royal-adjacent conversation to help carry it forward. Based on the scone controversy and the months of coverage leading up to it, many critics would argue the answer remains unclear. The brand's most discussed moments continue to emerge when royal themes enter the conversation. Again and again, the stories that travel the furthest seem to be the ones where audiences discover a royal connection and follow it wherever it leads. There are really two ways to interpret everything that happened, and the interesting part is that both explanations can be true at the same time. The first possibility is that as ever genuinely benefits from staying close to the royal conversation. In this reading, the audience most consistently interested in the brand is also deeply invested in the wider Sussex and royal narrative. Whether intentionally or not, the brand may have gradually adapted itself to appeal to exactly that audience because those are the people most likely to engage, comment, share, and keep the conversation alive. The second possibility shifts the focus away from the brand itself and toward the media ecosystem surrounding it. According to this interpretation, much of the royal connection is being created by commentators rather than by the content. After all, many of the people analyzing as ever are royal commentators by profession. Their audiences arrive expecting royal discussion, so almost any content produced by Meghan Markle ends up being viewed through that lens regardless of its actual subject matter. A recipe can become a royal story. A lifestyle post can become a royal comparison. A simple social media upload can become a debate about hierarchy, symbolism, and palace history. The truth is that both explanations probably contain some degree of reality. From the outside, it is almost impossible to know exactly how much influence each factor carries. Even the people running the brand may not have a perfect answer. What can be observed, however, is the pattern. Again and again, the stories generating the highest engagement, the widest coverage, and the strongest reactions seem to lead back toward royal connections rather than away from them. And that observation matters regardless of anyone's intentions. The real question raised by the scone controversy is whether this dynamic should be viewed as a commercial advantage or a commercial limitation. If royal-adjacent stories consistently produce the largest spikes in attention, then aligning content with royal news cycles becomes a perfectly logical business strategy. But there is a catch. The moment a brand depends on another news cycle for its biggest moments, it also becomes dependent on events it cannot control. William's viral scone discussion was never created to benefit as ever. It happened independently. The attention arrived naturally, and as ever entered the conversation afterward. The next viral William moment will happen on its own schedule as well, triggered by whatever he does next that captures public attention. When that happens, the brand will once again face the same decision about how closely it wants to position itself around the conversation. That creates what many observers would describe as a reactive position rather than a generative one. And that may be the most important structural takeaway from the entire scone week. The biggest issue is not whether the timing was intentional. It is not whether Angela Levin's interpretation is correct. It is not even whether a video featuring cream and jam carries royal inspiration or simply reflects a lifestyle aesthetic. The deeper issue is dependency. A brand that was originally introduced as independent from the royal institution continues to generate many of its most discussed moments when it appears closest to that institution. Meanwhile, Prince William, whose casual radio appearance started the entire chain reaction, seems completely unaware that any of this analysis is taking place. He joked with radio hosts about his grandmother's preferred way to eat scones, ignored a phone call during a football celebration, and moved on with his week. Yet somehow those ordinary moments became the catalyst for an entirely separate commercial and reputational debate. And that may be the most fascinating detail of all. The individual creating the strongest reactions around the Sussex brand appears to be the person making the least effort to create those reactions and the person least aware they are happening. So what exactly was the scone moment? Was it a deliberate effort to remain close to the royal conversation, or was it simply another example of a brand operating within a cultural space where royal comparisons are unavoidable? There may never be a definitive answer, but the pattern has appeared often enough, and over a long enough period of time, that it has become difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. Now we want to hear from you. Share your honest opinion in the comments below. Do you think this was strategy, circumstance, or a little bit of both? Make sure you're subscribed to Palace Insider so you never miss our next deep dive. And if you enjoy this kind of detailed analysis, hit the like button because it helps these conversations reach more people. Stay tuned because the next story is already on the way.